Linux Out Loud is firing up our mics, connecting those headphones as we search the community for themes to expound upon. We keep the banter friendly, the conversation somewhat on topic. I mean, have you heard this show before? And we have fun doing it. This week, we're spouting off about paying for the Linux distro you're currently using. Let's get into episode 17. Linux Out Loud is brought to you by DigitalOcean and Bitwarden. With me today are those two wild and crazy guys, Matt and Nate. How are you?
Fantastic.
Well, that's good. Matt, you actually got some time to do stuff this week, or not so much?
So, did not get to the things I wanted to do, unfortunately, typical life and other things getting in the way. So, I generically run Garuda. I had a wireless NIC card for my desktop. Unfortunately, that ran on a Realtek chipset, so I had to run an out-of-kernel module. You can probably see where this is going. Updated Garuda, that NIC is no longer working at all. It doesn't matter if you blacklist it, it doesn't matter what you do.
Well, that's fantastic.
I've uninstalled the drivers. I've reinstalled the drivers. For those that want to know, it's I believe it's an RT. See if I remember the actual acronym for it. It's RTL 88X UBC or UB, or I can't remember the full thing for it. But it's an out-of-kernel module that's required for the thing to work. Well, it doesn't matter if you blacklist it. Doesn't matter what you do. You plug it. You tell it to use the wireless, and network manager, network manager, whatever they're using in Garuda, just sits there and hangs and hangs and hangs. Doesn't detect a thing. So I ended up having to buy a new wireless NIC card, which, as of this recording, I'm currently sitting here waiting for it to show up.
Oh, nice.
This time, I made sure it was an Intel chipset for the desktop, so I don't have to run out-of-kernel modules. So it's an Intel-based AX210 chip, so I was like, I know it's in the kernel. I don't have to worry about it. I've checked support. I've checked the kernel logs. I've checked every bit of information to make sure this just works out of the box.
I thought wireless cards that didn't work with Linux is kind of a thing of the past. So was this like an old Broadcom? I didn't remember what is it you said. What brand of chipset was it?
It was a Realtek chipset. It's the same type of chipset that companies like TP-Link and a lot of those wireless USB adapters would use.
Okay,
but it's just Realtek's the more common one, I guess, unless you intentionally seek out Intel, which I did this time. But it was one that I had forever. So the fact that it kind of crapped out doesn't really surprise me. It was just mad annoying because it's like, went to do some stuff online. It was like, oh, can't. Oh, great. My core production machine that I just flipped everything on. This is going to be fun. So
it's like Linux circa 2006. That's great.
I'm not sure if I can't even really blame it on, I can't blame it on Linux specifically. It's a user, this particular instance, it's a user. I'm not blaming I know, Nate, you're going to oh, that's what you get when you run Arch.
Well, I was going to refrain from that.
This is actually a user knowingly running an out-of-tree module to get this to work. And then there was a kernel update for Garuda along with a bunch of other stuff. So the fact that it didn't work, it's on me. And for those that are going to ask, well, did you make sure the Linux headers and stuff were? Yes, I made sure I checked all for the Linux headers and everything else for the kernel. So before I get that question, because that's usually the thing that you run into in the video. This just card don't work no more. So had to go with a new one.
Yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
I was talking about some of my tech issues last week. You get to expound upon some of your tech issues this week. Isn't technology so fun and such a pain in the butt at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's great when it works, but when it breaks and you have to wait for it to fix, because that was a lot of the problem. There's no local place that I can really go and pick something up that is very specific to this. Because I needed to make sure the chipset was the right one. I needed, just a lot of situational stuff. So it was like, oh, that'll teach me to run out of kernel stuff and make sure that I'm using actually inline kernel supported products. Again, user, not so much the tech.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that Realtek is not upstreaming their stuff, or at least in a timely fashion, to Linux kernel. So I don't know what the problem is there, but that is part of the problem.
You can blame it. Obviously you can blame it on the manufacturer. This is actually I'm not sure if it's a community maintained driver, or I believe it is, if I remember correctly. You get what you get. So obviously, sign drivers and then blah, all the stuff that goes into running out of tree modules. Just, it is what it is. Like, again, I'm going to say I don't enjoy Realtek products at the moment or anything that's based on them. So I'll be trying to mitigate using those going forward as much as possible. So if I have to pay a little more premium for making sure a wireless card works, dang Skippy, I'm going to be making sure I pay a few more for a wireless card to work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because I think when you lose network connectivity and you're expecting it, it seems like perhaps there's not much we do without network connectivity anymore, good, bad, or otherwise. It is the reality of things. And so to lose your ability to communicate is just not a good thing. I mean, it's a huge inconvenience, if nothing else. And so are you using that computer right now and have it wired in instead, or is this a different?
No.
Okay.
Well, so the problem is where I'm located. The nearest wired outlet for where I am is about probably 50 feet away from me. So there's no good way to actually get to that outlet, though.
Sure, you can spend a couple $100 on some Cat 5 cable.
Without running a bunch of nonsensical stuff. So right now I'm doing this from my gaming laptop, which is ironically grew to Linux too. And that's where I'm doing this right now from. Trying to plug all the USB things into only 3 USB ports, that's a little problematic, but while I've been busy cleaning up my desktop and my wireless communication problem, Wendy, you've just been cleaning up.
Yeah, well, we had a bit of a mess that we came home to on Sunday, and so I had big plans for this coming week. While I did want to deep clean my house this summer, it's kind of happening now in a big rush. One of the things we learned is don't leave the house when the power's on because a kid might have left a bathtub running. Yeah, not so fun.
Oh,
not to come
no.
home to flooding. Yes, an absolute mess. So my brain's a little bit fried. If I sound a little bit crazy or not all there today, that's why. Just so much going on here with cleaning up and all of that fun stuff going on around here. So that's what I've currently been doing. Nothing super exciting. We went and enjoyed the mountains for a little bit to come home to an absolute mess. So we've learned our lesson. We know not to leave the house when the power is off. Make sure we wait until the power's back on. And then right now it's just lots and lots of emptying rooms and cleaning and pulling up carpets and all of that fun stuff.
On the bright side, it wasn't due to flooding, like flash flooding. So that there's, at least it wasn't that.
I would almost rather that it was due to some external thing than something we did, because it's a lot easier to get insurance to cover repair fees.
Okay, yeah, there is that. I just mean
insurance usually do have an act of God clause.
Right, exactly. I mean, in Idaho, not so much because we are in a desert. We live on a hill. So for us to get flooded out is pretty difficult at our current location. I think most of Idaho, you can't get flood insurance unless you live like really close to the river. So you'd be inside of that floodplain. We're just too much of a desert region. The flooring in the bathroom definitely needs to be replaced. And thankfully, they've got some of that in the garage that we can just pull back out and should be able to redo the bathroom, no problem.
Right. Well, good luck with that. That's some extra cleaning and renovating that wasn't on the schedule, huh?
Definitely not on the list. But we are doing the best we can with the situation we're in. We can't go back in time and make sure the tub was turned off before we left the house. So right now it's doing our best to properly clean it up, make sure everything is dried out. And at this point, like, it's a great excuse to completely gut each room and get rid of half of the stuff that's in there, because I wanted to do that this summer anyway.
Yeah, too bad life doesn't have a Control Z.
No kidding, right? That would be
Yeah.
amazing if we could get one of those.
Yeah, we should see if we can put a feature request in for that.
Will do. Hey, God, can I get a Control Z?
No, Wendy.
No, this is not like a photo app, Wendy, where you can click undo.
Gosh dang it. I can't erase it. I can't go back and start over with the raw file. None of that, huh?
You should have locked the layers that had the floor, and then you wouldn't have had any issues.
That's right. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I will next time. Nate, you're doing something a little bit out of the ordinary, and that's currently running Windows. Why are you doing this, and is it on bare metal?
Well, I wanted to hurt myself, and so I decided that it was time to run Windows. No, so I'm doing some work for a business that they need some like graphic design work, and I'm not a graphic designer. They need to update a bunch of designs to a new look, and I don't want to give too many details because it's not really important. But I have to use Adobe Illustrator to make this happen. As much as I would like to use something that's not proprietary, I do not want to disrupt the already established workflow that the business is already using. So I was given a license to run Adobe Illustrator, and try as I might, I could not get crossover Linux or Lutris or anything to be able to run Illustrator on Linux directly. And I did try for quite a while. This was not like didn't work. I did a lot of digging, a lot of reading, and no success. So I ended up installing Windows 10 on my laptop in a virtual machine because I couldn't, there's no way I could do it on bare metal. I only lasted like 30 seconds of having Windows running on it when I first got it. So I couldn't imagine changing that out now. Besides, I think there'd be something really sacrilege about removing OpenSUSE Tumbleweed and putting Windows on there. I think that
Yes.
I'd have to like turn in my Linux card. Yeah, that'd be just awful. Awful. Anyway, so I got Windows 10 running in a virtual machine. It actually does very well as far as doing Adobe Illustrator. Nothing is too terribly complex. And any of the stuff that I have to do it's pretty basic work. It's basically a lot of busy work of doing the necessary changes to the artwork. Now, I'm not a graphic designer by trade. I do CAD work. So using Illustrator is kind of a combination, in my opinion, of using GIMP and FreeCAD, essentially, as far as how it handles layers and so forth. So it's not any more difficult than any of the 3D design stuff I do. It's just a little bit tedious. So I just started doing that as of yesterday, actually, and yeah, just it's a side hustle of sorts. It's I don't know how much work there's going to be ultimately, but it's enough to keep me busy for quite a while. I find that using Windows, I know it just feels clunky, just the way it operates, and then the whole even though I have a Windows license, I downloaded from HP the already pre-activated version of Windows, but apparently it can't activate itself. So I don't know what's going on. I'll get it figured out at some point in time, but I can't install the fonts I need right now to make everything work as I need to make it work. So at some point in time, I'll get it figured out. But I certainly would never pay for Windows. Like it came with my laptop, so I already have a legal copy. But there's no way that I would ever. I mean, it's just not. I'm sorry, it's just not good. I haven't used Windows for a couple of years actually, but it truly is not a good user experience. It doesn't really run well, and I've run a lot of things in virtual machines, so it's not like this is all that different. A lot of the user interface design decisions I think are just not to my liking at all.
So you would agree with my daughter from last week that you don't like the overall look of Windows, you don't like the way that it runs itself, the user experience in general. now, because you needed to use this specialty software that can really only be used on Mac and Windows, which in your case, it was easier to install a virtual machine and then get it going on there. How is that experience running that specialty software in a virtual machine? Are you notice any like lagging issues, or is your hardware covering all of that pretty well?
No, as far as lagging, I don't notice any, which is surprising, since I think Illustrator is somewhat demanding, but it's not really that demanding. The files aren't that big. But it runs it just fine. Actually, better than I expected. I expect there to be a lot of like, lagginess and so forth, but it doesn't appear to be. I find there's actually more lagginess in just doing things like opening up Explorer to search for files than there is in the software itself. So I don't know why that is. And then the nice thing is I can mount the local file system onto the VM, so I can actually access so I can have like one spot of files. I don't have it living in a virtual machine, so I can actually have Linux take care of all the file management in the background. So that works out quite nicely. Illustrator runs great, but Windows itself it does not. It'd be nice if I could run like just that application somehow through and not have to actually launch Windows. But
that
whatever.
That would be nice, yeah.
That would be very nice, but that's not a thing. I'm sure somebody knows how to like launch it. Like you could do like a RDP into some other box someplace else to do it, but I have to be able to operate without network access from time to time.
Exactly.
Although if that happens, I don't know, because it's a license thing. I don't know if it checks the license initially, or I don't know how it checks the license, but I have been using it sometimes without network connection.
Yeah, I've had my own experience recently with Windows, not including what we talked about last week. I will get into that in the host-related interests section. This episode of Linux Out Loud is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Cloud computing can be, let's say, complex, but standing up reliable, affordable cloud infrastructure really doesn't have to be. At DigitalOcean, you can enjoy a comprehensive portfolio of compute, storage, database, and networking products that put your cloud infrastructure in capable hands so you and your team can get back to doing what matters most, building world-changing apps that grow your business. DigitalOcean also provides you with predictable pricing, robust product docs, and services that developers love. DigitalOcean helps teams regardless of size, whether you're a team of 1 to a team of 1,000 people. DigitalOcean helps your team grow with their simple, powerful cloud computing services. As a listener of Linux Out Loud and a member of the DLN community, you can get started for free. In fact, even better than free, because DigitalOcean is giving you a $100 credit when you sign up at do.co/tux2022. That's do.co/tux2022. So again, you can get started with your $100 credit on DigitalOcean's awesome cloud platform by going to do.co/tux2022. And we want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of Linux Out Loud. You said you wouldn't pay for Windows right now. So if you had a brand new machine that needed an OS, you would not be buying a Windows key in order to put on that. Now let's say that you needed a key for OpenSUSE. Would you be willing to buy a key for that distro?
I don't know if I like the idea of keys necessarily, but would I pay for OpenSUSE? Yes, I would. And in fact, you might be surprised to know this, but I actually do pay for commercial Linux, a workstation, a single license, and that's actually from SUSE, because I want to be able to support desktop Linux in a way that directly benefits me. So I do actually pay for an annual subscription to SUSE Workstation.
That is very interesting. So you're saying that you don't necessarily like the idea of a key. So if it was a key that you had to enter to boot up, you're like, not so great on that. But having a license, how does that work different for SUSE than it does on like with a Windows key? What is that license activation like?
Well, I don't actually run SUSE itself because I run Tumbleweed, and that so it doesn't really fit. But I could actually convert I could convert a Leap system to a SUSE Linux Enterprise workstation But that's not really what I want to do. The question came like, how can I support the Linux distribution that I use the most? And it was actually Neil who said, well, you should get a license for using SUSE Linux Enterprise. I said, well, I'm not going to really use it because I'm going to use Tumbleweed. He says it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because you're buying that license, that tells SUSE that there are people using the desktop. And so they're going to do more work to improve the desktop. And that translates down into OpenSUSE Leap and ultimately into Tumbleweed. Not necessarily directly, but it does have a trickling effect. And it does show there is demand for desktop Linux. Also, SUSE does a lot to support a lot of projects out there. And so it costs me $50 a year. And I am doing, it's a small way to contribute to my experience on Linux. So yes, I absolutely would pay for Linux. In fact, I do. But it's because I really believe in the product that I'm given. And also, it's really nice because when I did install it, I wasn't asked for any key at all. So I don't know how I feel like they're pretty loosey-goosey on the rules for how you would use it.
Would it be more if you called for some customer support that they would need to verify that you had purchased a license of SUSE in order to make that happen?
So I think the license that I got, and I'm actually going to look this up right now because I do not recall, is I'm quite certain that I have unable to sign in. That's cool. I haven't logged into it for a while, so apparently they lock your account when you don't log into it.
Uh-oh. All right, so while you're looking that up, I want to ask Matt, is there any Linux distribution that you would be willing to pay for?
So for me, yes, I actually do pay for Linux distributions, especially the ones that I use. One that I constantly pay for currently through a Patreon donation is Chimera OS, just because I used it as a Steam Machine OS until Valve actually puts out Steam OS 3 for everybody. Garuda Linux I have a subscription to for so much per month. The stuff that I use I pay for because it just makes sense. You're allowing me to do what I need to much easier. So why am I not going to support that? This is where the difference, I think, with like a Windows key or a Mac OS type of stuff, you're not limiting me to how I can use it. I will gladly give a financial transaction for that freedom. So people want to talk about the freedoms of open source or free software and all that stuff. You're giving me like Nate, like you like to say, Linux puts the personal back in computing. Totally true. So the distros that allow me to do that the easiest, or fill in a function or form that I need, are going to be the ones that I financially support. It's the same way that I do with applications and stuff that I constantly use. If I make any type of money from those applications, that money gets returned to those projects in some way, shape, or form. Might not be all at once, might be over the course of a year, but it gets redistributed back to the stuff that I use, because I understand that without that stuff, I wouldn't be able to do what I do, and I wouldn't be able to get a lot of stuff done.
I kind of miss the days of when I could go to the store and get like a boxed copy of a Linux distribution. That's how I started my Linux journey, was going to the store and picking up a boxed copy of Mandrake Linux. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was between Mandrake and SUSE, and I went for the Mandrake, ironically. I've never thought of not paying for Linux, really. I think there were some times when it was nice that I went through some rough patches in my 20s. It was nice that I didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But when I had the financial ability and the wherewithal, now I'm going to contribute back. And I use OBS regularly, and so I do contribute to that project as well, because it's very important that I see that project continue so I can continue to use it. All this development time isn't free. And people say, oh, free software, they shouldn't charge for it. And I say, okay, well, last I checked, people still need to eat, and food isn't free. Somebody's got to work to plant that food. Nothing's automatic. It doesn't just come magically from the store.
All of that server space takes money and hardware in order to use, and all of that build time. And then, like you said, people need to be able to eat. If you're spending all of your time working on open source software, where are you getting an income from to feed yourself, for your living situation, to support your family? That is really, really important. I think you bring up excellent points as to reasons in order to pay for or support a distro. Now, I'm kind of thinking about this in the lines of Windows. I wouldn't necessarily want to buy a Windows license today. Absolutely not. Do I have some systems that I could go ahead and install it on because I have an existing license? Yes. There are times when I do need it. Like I said, I will talk to you about that a little bit later in the episode. But I have other reasons for not wanting to pay for Windows 10 or Windows 11 or even any of the past ones. Some of that is because of the way they steal my data. I don't want to be paying a company to be like, hey, and by the way, here you go, here's all of my information. It's not really something I want to do. I want to be able to open up my computer and know that it's 100% mine, and that's one thing that a Linux allows me to do. So I feel better about handing over money to support the people that are developing and working on the distros that I enjoy, because I love the work and I value the work that they're doing. So it is something that I want to see continue, whereas I'm only booting into a Windows system because I have to, and like you, Nate, there is no other option to get that one thing done that needs to be done with the Windows system. It's 100% out of begrudging necessity and not out of actual want and willingness to use that thing. So that's where that monetary value definitely separates.
It does. And I think that basically every time you buy a laptop, you get a Windows key, whether you like it or not, from most manufacturers.
Right.
So I mean, they're handing those things out like candy, essentially. And like candy, it's not good for your teeth or your computer. But begrudgingly using it is exactly it. And it's really unfortunate that Adobe does not support at least some level, like that they don't build a flat pack or an app image or, I don't care, a snap, something that they could distribute for Linux users. I can't imagine that it's that much more additional work to do. I mean, I don't know what the holdup is. I'm sure like there's testing and there's a lot of like, the whole, bug squashing and everything else. It's really very unfortunate. At least they don't make some way like, all right, we're not going to support it, but here's some of the tooling that can make it happen. Good luck, happy trails. I would even take that. Zero support for it, but just give me some sort of a pathway.
Yeah, because Nate, you'd almost be equating that to almost kind of like how Valve treats Windows on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, exactly it.
They're like, here's the drivers, have fun. Not our problem though.
So if somebody wants to do that, go forth and do great things. It's not for me to tell you no. It's, go ahead and do it. And it's too bad that other companies don't have that kind of a view of things. Yeah,
I was going to say, for me, I know Windows is one of those begrudging, like, things you just can't get rid of sometimes, especially like people in like my case who are gamers and that kind of stuff, because sometimes I love the advancements in Linux and gaming and Proton, but let's be real, there are some things that sometimes I'm not going to argue for my entertainment. Like, to totally be real, I'm not going to spend 2 hours messing around with Proton or Wine Tricks or Proton Trick, some weird esoteric stuff from in the CLI just to get a game to work.
Actually, I would.
Well, that's you.
That's because I'm a little bit of an OpenSUSE zealot, and I'm not happy unless I'm using it.
I have a lower barrier to entry. That's really what it boils down to for me. So Windows is one of those things I've mitigated to one machine. That's its function. It's the only thing it has. Everything else, I do have a Mac OS machine, but obviously it's a Mac, so it's pretty much stuck with what it's stuck at.
Right.
So for me, outside of that, everything's Linux, and a lot of it is simply because it's the best tool for the job. It's the best function to form, to freedom, to control, to the purpose build. Take your pick. Windows tries to be a generalized OS. The nice thing with Linux is I can have the generalized OS, but I can also have specific built things for it. And that's where, for me, that advantage is worth paying for. So if I can get a generalized OS that basically has everything out of the box for me with something like Garuda, cool, here's some cash. I'm not saying cash is the only way to contribute to a project. I'm just saying the question is, would we pay for it? Personally, for me, I definitely do. I think it's worth paying for. And just like I think it's worth paying for projects and all the other things so that those people can focus on maybe the project instead of, where their next meal will come from, how they're going to get the kid through X, Y, or Z project or whatever their financial situation is. Because money is replaceable. Time is not. So when companies and teams and individuals give their time, there is some type of trade-off they are, I don't want to say expecting, but would like to see given back. And if you have the financial means, I would recommend financially contributing back. And the thing is, I don't view Linux distros in like this, it's a free ISO to download. Like, yeah, there's tons of distros that I've downloaded and just tested the ISO and kind of moved on because they don't stick. They don't stick around as a tool that I would pay for. It's like, kind of the renting of something. It's just like you test drive it, you mess around with it in the store a little bit, and you put it back in the box, and you go about your day. That's kind of how I view that. I think viewing distros and stuff more as a product as opposed to as a project gives a different inclination on how you're willing to contribute back to that product or project, however you want to view it.
Yeah, I would say if I were to line up side by side, let's say for my purposes, OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, for the same cost it would be to run Windows 10. I haven't tried 11 yet. I would say the bang from my buck on OpenSUSE is way better than that on Windows itself. Sure, Windows does provide a lot of third-party applications out there that companies are actually supporting. So I get that piece of it. But as far as the actual desktop interface, desktop experience, the amount of software you do get right out of the gate, you get a lot more from OpenSUSE than you do from Windows. And I would say a much more complete desktop experience as well. I mean, I don't like anybody's theme that's shipped out of the box. Doesn't matter what it is. There's something that I'm going to tweak to make it work better for me. And I can't even make those tweaks in Windows. I can make the tweaks and adjustments in OpenSUSE. I can personalize it for me to work for me, not me work for it. So that's a huge piece of it too. And so I feel like there's a lot more value in the open source desktop environment.
Wendy, do you have anything to add to the conversation for paying for software or OS, whatever?
Not really. I think you pretty well summarized it in what I said before, that something that I do find value in, it's worth it for me to pay for or donate to in order to keep that thing going. And while I give Windows a hard time, I don't give it a hard time necessarily because you need to pay for a license for it. It's just not the piece of software. It's not an operating system that I want to use. So I don't value my dollars going to that thing. I would rather put them somewhere else.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This episode of Linux Out Loud is sponsored by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the password manager that we use and trust. Bitwarden lets you set up things like a PIN to easily access your password manager, as well as additional authentication, such as master passwords, and adding phrases to fingerprint security, all to keep your passwords safe. Bitwarden is the easiest and safest way for individuals, teams, and businesses to store, share, and sync their sensitive data. Go to bitwarden.com/tux to get started for free. Say you want that premium account that starts at just $10 per year. What comes with that? 1 gigabyte of encrypted file storage, 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F, and Duo, Vault Health Reports, TOTP Authenticator storage and generation, plus priority customer support. Make the smart move like many in the community have and go to bitwarden.com/TUX to get started for free. If you're like me though, you want to show your appreciation for this awesome open source project by signing up for that premium edition. especially since it starts at just $10 a year. Thanks to Bitwarden for sponsoring this episode of Linux Out Loud. Let's completely switch gears, or not really. This is still a paid-for thing. It's Game of the Week. What do you got, Matt?
Oh, God, I love that transition. So the game of the week I have is a game called Immortal Unchained. It is a third-person looter shooter. So for those that don't know, like that kind of category of gaming, take the gotta get better gear mentality from like Diablo 2 or Diablo. Nate, I know those are probably too new for you still.
Yeah, so?
Just saying. Sorry, Ultima, that better?
Oh, there we go. Okay, got it.
So get the better gear mentality from all those type of games and put it in a shooter as opposed to, sword and fantasy type games. Also has a little bit of a Dark Souls element. So for those that don't know, Dark Souls, Demon Souls games are known to be kind of hard. That's relative to the game generically. I'm kind of wary of like what they would call Souls-like games. So overall, though, the thing that I like about this game thus far is the looter shooter stuff. It's actually not insanely expensive at its base price that it's currently at. I would say at $11 or $10.99 US on Steam, that it's probably worth getting. You can customize your styles, your stats, your play style, and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of nice little touches and stuff into that. I'm not saying it's the best game ever. Works on Proton because I have it on my Steam Deck, which is where I've actually been playing it. So it's a nice game to kind of play in those short bursts. I hate the term gaming on the go, but it's kind of actually appropriate. It's like, I got 15 minutes, so I'll sit there and play, 15 minutes on my Steam Deck of a portion of it. Turn power off the Steam Deck, come back to it, and when I get another 10, 15 minutes or whatever. So it's one of those kind of games that I can play in kind of a piecemeal fashion, so that I think it's good for.
Well, I think the animation is great. Like the hustle run, I think looks just it's animated super well. And also, you can get the entire Immortal Unchained Ultimate Edition bundle for only $22. I mean, really.
Yeah, for what I would generically recommend for games, that's all the DLC. Do note the soundtrack is free. So for those that want, game music, the base game, it's $11. So if you're looking for those type of games, this is definitely one of those to take a look at. Like I said, not the most groundbreaking game ever, but it works on Linux. It works. They have console editions if you want it on PS4 or Xbox One, if you want to go a generation prior. So definitely a little fun game that I came across and plays really nice. Even plays on super high settings on the Steam Deck. Just saying.
Nice. That's good
and
news.
This is a game that came out. This is a game that came out in 2018. So those gamers that worry about their great gaming graphics and solid frame rates and all the other stuff, the Steam Deck can definitely handle this one. Not the highest requirement for games. I think game requirements max out at like a 780. So it's a few generations old as far as the video requirements.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I mean, you're holding it in your hand. What does it matter?
Well, I don't care. Like, we all know the type of games I play, so like graphical fidelity ain't really my thing. I'm on the low end when it comes to those requirements. I'm not I need 300 frames a second at 4K. I don't fall into that category.
I don't think that's even possible.
They're trying to do 500. They're trying to do like 500 hertz monitors now. I think Asus is at that point right now. So yeah, crazy stuff. Anyway,
yeah, good for them.
Yeah, nothing I'm interested.
Maybe it'll finally get to the point where Steam, or I should say, where modern PC gaming has the speed of the 1980s Nintendo, as far as the lack of latency. Maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
500 megahertz, yeah.
While I'm making game recommendations and Nate's talking about the running animations, Nate, you got something running but with lighting.
I do. So it's a continuation of lighting. So my house is still every season I change. I haven't really talked about it much, but I have the lights on my house. But this is something a little bit different. I want to understand how to use DMX lighting. Now, DMX is an open standard. I don't remember what it means, but I purchased an open source USB to DMX box so I can control DMX lights. And I installed an application, which interestingly is hosted for other distributions on the OpenSUSE build service. This application called QLC Plus. Now, it runs on Windows, Mac OS, of course, Ubuntu, and also for the automated builds, they use the Open Build service for Arch, Fedora, OpenSUSE, and Ubuntu. So anyway, I installed this on my laptop to see how the application works, and I just started playing around with it, and I'm trying to understand. I'm going to school and trying to understand how this DMX standard works. So I have 4 lights that I purchased. I got a deal on it, so it's not like I'm breaking the bank on this. And have QLC installed, and I have it all working, and I still don't know what I'm doing. So it's time to do some tutorials, but I have gotten to the point now where I understand, at least the hardware bits of it. So now I'm learning the software bits, and hopefully I can figure all this out and be able to do something fun with it. So by next Christmas, I can do just a little bit more to the light shows on my house. So it's a kind of a long-term plan here that I hope to be able to, actually become not an expert, but at least a seasoned novice in how to use it properly.
I think it'll make your winter light show this year absolutely awesome. You normally start with October with Halloween, so I guess this is like fall and winter.
Yeah, I'll start with
Show?
Right now my house is doing kind of a red, white, and blue thing, because of Memorial Day, and then they got 4th of July.
Okay.
So it's kind of doing that
Perfect.
kind of a thing. So I actually want to employ this a little bit quicker than even by the fall, but basically I want to have it ready to go. So when I do my light shows for
Your big Christmas one.
my big Christmas ones, yeah. So the idea is I want the whole front room in my house, which is like the homeschool room, the inside of it, I want to basically do lighting effects within it to complement what's going on the outside of the house too, since it's all windows.
Oh, cool. That'll be awesome.
So, and then the other side of it too is then we can have, impromptu dance parties in the homeschool room.
Well, heck yeah, that sounds like fun.
Be loads of fun. So Wendy, I don't know what I'm doing yet with DMX lights, but I know that you are an experienced root and ROM hacker on mobile devices. So you're doing more of this.
I would say I was an experienced root and ROMer, however you want to say that, I'm not entirely sure. But it had been a really, really long time since I'd done any of that with a phone. And I have had my OnePlus 9 since November, since the end of November. I've really, really liked the phone. One thing that's kept me from rooting and ROMing it is time. And the other thing I was worried about was a degradation in camera quality because the stock OnePlus camera app that can utilize both cameras on the back of this phone isn't available in custom ROMs. Well, I'd finally reached the point where I was like, gosh dang it, I just want to go ahead and play with this phone. So on Friday, let me put this in context, today is Wednesday, June 1st. So on Friday, April 27th, I was like, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'd actually downloaded a whole bunch of things the night before. I'd been doing a whole bunch of reading, and I was like, okay, I'm going for it. I got the bootloader unlocked. The ROM that I wanted to eventually install needed me to downgrade both A and B ROM partitions to Android 11. The way I used to do this all the time, like I used to flash ROMs a lot. And fast boot was without a doubt the way to go. So I was following a tutorial. I'd gotten to a specific place in the tutorial that said, okay, now it's time to fast boot, reboot, fast boot, and then you go ahead and continue the installation process. Well, once I had done that, the phone never rebooted. Like, I have this black screen and we're not getting anywhere. And I'm like, oh, this is a problem. So I'd already done some looking about the OnePlus MSM tool, and it is the one that they use to fix phones. Mine's the global version, and so I'm like, oh, not a problem. Biggest issue is you need a Windows system to do this, which is the biggest bummer. I could just do it from my existing Linux systems. Thankfully, I already got one up and running. I told you guys that before. We needed one to do some state education testing type stuff. Already got it, no problem. Pulled it up, went to run it, and the first issue I was having, because it was seeing the phone, even though there was black screen, I couldn't get into recovery, I couldn't get into bootloader. It literally was just a brick with no functionality at all. So it was being seen. It was in a very special mode. I can't remember what that mode is, but it's an emergency mode essentially. And we were seeing that, but when I went to go run the process in order to reflash the phone, it was telling me that it couldn't communicate. Well, I eventually got that worked out. I needed to hold the buttons in a particular way, so to turn off, reconnect, and then you had 10 seconds to restart again, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to know all those nitty-gritty details because it wouldn't make any sense unless you were standing here watching me. Anyway, it connected. We finally had a process starting, and it's like, oh, yeah, the images don't match, so we can't fix it. And I was stuck on Friday with no phone. Well, I needed to go make dinner and do all of the mom stuff, and the phone had to just sit, so I pulled the phone that I typically use for audiobooks, since mine is a USB-C only without an audio cable. I use a separate phone as my audiobook phone when I need to pop one in at night because I can't sleep. I threw my SIM card in that. I had a working phone, a kind of sort of working phone. It didn't have Element, it didn't have Telegram, and so it was mostly functional. As you guys know, I missed messages on Monday, but for multiple reasons. And part of that reason was I didn't have Element installed on my phone because I had messed up my phone on Friday. So on Saturday...
I think we can let this one slide.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. On Saturday, we went camping. On Sunday, we came home to a mess. On Monday, we were continuing to clean up that mess, and my dad was here for his birthday. As much of a fun birthday as it could be at your daughter's house, where they're spending most of their time doing cleanup of water instead of, just getting to hang out.
With squishy floors.
Right, exactly. So yesterday, I'm like, okay, I've got to get this fixed. And I had made a post on XDA forums. That is the best place to get information on that I'm having this issue. These are the things that I've tried, and this is where I'm stuck, and I still continued to dig. So even though I'd post this message, I didn't want to stop looking just in case I came across the right thing, which thankfully I did. And I will post a link to that thread in the show description, but I couldn't flash the OnePlus 9 global version in order to fix this. And I know this is going to sound really, really weird. I had to flash the OnePlus 9 Pro version for India. Yep, totally worked. I went back to a booting phone and it was just in the nick of time because the battery on this thing was almost dead. If I had waited another day, I literally would have been in major trouble. It would have had to have gone back to OnePlus for them to get it working. So thankfully that didn't happen. Got it done in the nick of time and then spent a lot of time reverting it back in order to get it on the proper US version of the software. And now, right now, this very moment, my OnePlus 9 is running Nameless ASOP. I've only been playing with it for a little bit. I finally had everything up and running yesterday evening. This is before noon my time, so I haven't even been playing with it for a full 24 hours. But for the most part, I really like it. It's pretty simple. My biggest complaint, and one of the reasons why I didn't go to a custom ROM of 4 was there is definitely a degradation in the image quality, and I'm only able to use one of those sensors and not both of them. So I'm still looking for a solution to that, but that's been my other adventure for the week. There you go. My need for a Windows system, non-working phone, all of that fun stuff. Like, it's tech drama here all the time.
Yeah, and then whatever caused your power outage to cause a flood, which chain reacted into other work.
Right, exactly.
Like technology betrayed you this past weekend, as far as I'm concerned.
It has been one heck of an interesting week, one heck of a crazy start to the summer. I actually hope that it gets calmer from here.
Yeah, that's a lot to handle at one point. Now the ROM you're using now, you got that? Is it like a Lineage OS or would you say what it was? I remember.
This one is called Nameless.
Okay, Nameless. You did say that.
Yep, it is based on the Android open source project. It's pretty simple. It's very Pixel-esque related because it uses the Pixel launcher and those kind of things inside of it. Normally, I run a different launcher on top of my system because I like to have a lot more customization, especially when it comes to the icons that are used and how everything's laid up. I like a very, very clean desktop. I like a very, very clean homepage for my phone. And so there's definitely more clutter on it than I typically like, but I've been trying to play with it as it was meant to be.
Well, that's excellent. Like, I don't go through phones very quickly, but every time I get a phone and then I replace that phone, that there are all these new hurdles in flashing a ROM onto these newer phones.
Right.
For whatever reason, they have like those A/B slots for something I don't understand, and so forth. So
it's actually kind of a good concept. So if you're going to get an update and your active ROM slot, let's say it's A, the update will be installed on B, and if there's a problem, the software will fall back to A, so that you have two different versions, and it's able to keep you supposedly on a working phone.
Well, I mean, I think that's great news that they do that. But I haven't, I have a Moto G Power 2021 that I bought new, which I never buy anything new. And I haven't messed with it at all. I've left it vanilla stock. And I find that the camera interface in that thing is just kind of terrible. The camera crashes quite a bit. So I'm almost to the point where I feel like I should flash something onto my Moto G Power, because the stock Motorola stuff coming down doesn't seem to be improving at all. It seems to be degrading the phone over time, which is very unlike how things work on Lineage, I find. Or maybe any other ROMs.
Lineage has been pretty solid for us in the past. It's currently what all of the Amazon Fire tablets are running. Unfortunately, there hasn't really been any updates for them. It was kind of a dead device in the terms of development like that. So I would definitely say check the forums, see if there's active development going on for it, and then flash it if there's something there. The other thing you can always do, if there isn't active development for that particular phone, you can find another phone that you like, that there is active development for, pick it up used and sell that one, or keep it as a backup.
Yeah, it's working okay for me. It's not a problem. It's just very often when I go to take a picture, it'll crash. It's irritating.
Nate, out of curiosity, are you using the default camera app by any chance?
Everything default. Yeah, I'm just using everything standard.
So having a Motorola device, I will totally agree. Their picture quality and just like the interface and all the stuff that goes with it, 100% not good. So I would definitely recommend using Open Camera as opposed to the
Open Camera.
You can find it in F-Droid. It's a totally open source app for Android, and it exposes a lot of things that most manufacturers would shut off in certain aspects of the camera. Some allow you to have, like, the camera itself can actually take 4K, but sometimes manufacturers will cap it at 1080 because they're concerned about overheating or whatever in the manufacturer photo app, whereas Open Camera was like, okay, you want to take a 4K video, you burn your phone, whatever, it's you. So it has a nice set of feature lists in it. So something you might want to check out. I can't say, like, I don't have the eye for the photo comparison maybe and post-processing stuff that, like, probably Wendy would, just by looking at different apps. I'm sure, Wendy, you've probably noticed when you use different apps, different quality in the processing and stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that especially smartphones do. They rely really heavily on the post-processing that those different chips can do. Now, a lot of these cell phone cameras will have their own chip connected to it for the processing, just like you would in a DSLR and whatnot. And then there is proprietary software that is written specifically for that camera, that sensor, that lens, and that chip in order to give you the best possible image that can come out of that camera from the manufacturer. Now, I have had Motorola phones in the past. I can attest that they definitely don't have the best cameras on them. One of the reasons why we went OnePlus this time was because it had a decent camera on it. Now, I don't take a ton of pictures with my camera phone, but I will take pictures of the kids or whatever we're doing, send them to my parents, sharing that way. But my husband spends a lot of time out and about in the woods working on different things at work, and having a higher quality camera is important for him, even when he's on the job site working on things, because he can send a picture back to the office or whatever needs to be done. And making sure that that's easy to see is definitely important. So right now, for us, or at least for me on my OnePlus, I am missing that proprietary software in the back end that not only makes the images look good, but allows me to use both of the lenses that are on the back of my camera. The Open Camera is an awesome app. Like Matt said, it has a lot of really great features, and if you're dealing with a camera like the ones on especially some of those lower end Motorola phones, it could potentially give you a better image than the stock one because of the additional options you have. But if you're on a higher end phone, you're going to get your very best images in relation to the stock camera with the stock firmware software that processes them.
Well, I will tell you already, I installed Open Camera, and it doesn't crash. I can take a photo right away.
Nice.
And I even can take video right away without any like hang-ups or hiccups or anything like that. So automatically, I mean, right out of the gate, this Open Camera is way better than what came with the Motorola. That actually makes the phone tolerable. So yay, and I don't want to chuck my phone. Thanks, guys.
And do note, it's open source.
To be fair, Motorola has one of my favorite features when it comes to phone, and that is the chop motion in order to turn on the flashlight. When we went from Motorola to OnePlus, I greatly missed that action.
Yeah, I use that all the time. I like that. I shake the phone, get my light, shake it, turn it off. That's great. That's almost worth the price of admission.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there isn't anywhere else that has it. The OnePlus, you could before choose whether you could draw a V or an O on the screen, and the screen has to be turned off, like can't be lit up, and that'll turn it on. And then they changed it so it couldn't be an O, it just had to be that V shape. And then I was constantly accidentally turning on the flashlight just by the way I was picking it up, but then couldn't turn it on when I wanted to. So I don't like the OnePlus gesture in order to do it. Motorola nailed it, for sure. That's one thing they absolutely nailed. Just a quick reminder to all of you awesome listeners out there, Matt is doing a live gaming charity event on June 20th for Cure. It starts at 9 a.m. Eastern Time and goes to June 21st, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, a full 24 hours. This one is for Cure, Citizens United in Research for Epilepsy. Let's help him reach that $1,500 goal, because if he gets there, we get to torture Matt with Among Us. Let's make that happen. Can't wait to see you all there on June 20th, 2022.
I think you mean grace him with Among Us.
That's proper wording. Thank you so much for correcting me.
No, she's right. Torment me.
No. It's grace. You just don't know it yet.
But you will.
You'll love it. I hope I have my Steam Deck by then.
Now it's your turn to toss in your 2 cents on today's topics. Hit the discourse form, drop us a line under this video, or contact form by visiting tuxdigital.com/contact. If you would like to hang out with us on our preferred social media, see the links in the bottom of the show description. Find other great shows like Hardware Addicts, GameSphere, Linux Saloon, and more at tuxdigital.com. Show off your love for your favorite podcasts and shows by visiting the Tux Digital Merch Store. Grab yourself some awesome swag like Matt's favorite I Paused My Game to Be Here shirt. As always, we thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with another awesome episode of Linux Out Loud. Until then, keep the banter friendly, the conversation somewhat on topic, and have fun doing it.